How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours with Bryan Alvarez talking pro wrestling. We're also going to have Bruce Mitchell of Pro Wrestling Torch on as our special guest in about a half an hour. We'll be talking about all of the current news in pro wrestling, including last night's SmackDown tapings and just whatever else is going on. Whatever you guys want to talk about, you can phone in at 1-877-392-3299 in about a half an hour. And, of course, you can always send emails, and we have plenty of those. Bryan, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
It's good. How'd the issue turn out?
Turned out pretty good. I was done early. I did absolutely nothing this weekend except work on the newsletter, so last night was pretty much a breeze. No real big news except for SmackDown tapings, and went well.
Okay. Good for you.
I know that things did not go well for you. I can just tell.
Well, you know, when you're like doing your lead story and you're getting all the information at like midnight, and then it's midnight and you got to start writing it. That's pretty scary. So anyway, no, it was a long night, and got a lot of raves about the Chris Benoit Steve Austin match last night from Edmonton, which will air on SmackDown tomorrow night, and we'll talk about that in just a second. First, wanted to mention that UPW tonight is holding its big show, its monthly show at the Galaxy Theater in Santa Ana. It's actually no big WWF stars, or actually, I shouldn't say that, because actually there are several WWF stars. They just haven't been on WWF television yet. A lot of WWF contracted people on the show, but no, like, whatever. A lot of ex-WCW. Medium names. Anyway, the top match is Samoa Joe, who is the UPW champion, is defending against Sean O'Haire. So that'll be... Is it the first time Sean O'Haire's wrestled since WCW closed down?
I think it is. A lot of these.
I haven't heard his name. Mikey Henderson's wrestling Chuck Palumbo. Chuck Palumbo has wrestled a few matches. I know at least one in Mexico and maybe a couple of indies in that area. Keiji Sakota against Chavo Guerrero Jr., who I think I've seen Chavo's name a few places, but he hasn't wrestled much. Then for the UPW tag team titles, Nova and Frankie Kazarian face the Ballard brothers, which actually is going to be a hell of a match. Josh Wilcox, who's under consideration for the new WCW, if there will be a new WCW, or I shouldn't say, or in whatever form it'll be. Josh Wilcox against Adam Pearce. This is a match that a lot of people are talking to me about, and Super Dragon, who everybody raves about, and I saw Super Dragon when he first broke in, and obviously he's improved a lot since then. I mean, for like 5 matches in, he was very good, but it's been a couple of years, I guess, since I've seen him. But he's wrestling Juventud Guerrera, so that's a very interesting match. And then Nathan Jones and John Heidenreich against Michael Modest and Donovan Morgan. And of course, Nathan Jones and John Heidenreich are going to Japan on the 14th for Shinya Hashimoto's group. Anyway, that's the deal there.
Hashimoto will be there tonight.
Shinya Hashimoto will be there, and Naohiro Hoshikawa will be wrestling. I think they'll probably do some sort of an angle with Hashimoto and Tom Howard, because that's the main event on the June 14th show. And I don't know if that June 14th show is a pay-per-view in Japan or not, but it's a bomb. And I don't mean that in a good way.
I think that weren't they having problems with like the last show? It was a last-minute deal whether or not it would be on pay-per-view. Yeah,
and the only reason it got saved was because they had Misao and Ogawa against each other in the tag match. I mean, without that,
they have one hell of a main event that they added last minute. I don't think it'll be on pay-per-view.
Yeah, they got to get Hickson Gracie for Ogawa, don't they? The day before. Or something.
Yeah, nice try.
Yeah.
It takes like 2 years to negotiate that guy into one match. It's not going to happen overnight.
I know. What a businessman, though. You got to admit.
Oh yeah.
I don't think there's anyone, except for maybe Hogan, who has ever made more money doing less in this business than Hickson Gracie. I mean,
you got to put Sting on that list. He's made a hell of a lot doing not much.
We should have a list. Kevin Nash too.
Yeah, at least Kevin Nash actually went on the road. Sting did nothing for a full year.
Yeah,
I guess he was on the road standing in the rafters.
Well, he went every Monday. Came from the ceiling. And then he came back and drew one gigantic buy rate, and then that was it. It was all downhill from there. But he didn't. He went on the road a little bit. But you're right. I mean, as far as like Sting made a lot of money, not doing a whole heck of a lot. But anyway. Yeah, actually a lot more than Hickson Gracie. Hickson Gracie's payoffs. I mean, it's several $100,000 for a match, but it's not like making $1.5 million a year or $2 million a year or what Hogan made, which is considerably more than that. I guess Rodman probably made more money doing less than anyone in wrestling.
Tyson?
Tyson? Yeah. Yeah, those would be the ones, really.
Can't really count those guys, though.
You can't Rodman. I mean, he actually wrestled.
Yeah, but he was a guy that, he was a big name. They brought him in. They gave him his $3 million or whatever they gave him, and he did his thing. Not like a guy like Nash that he was contracted to be an active wrestler and be there all the time, and Sting, and they were there and they didn't do anything, and they made their money.
Yeah.
They were smooth enough to make their millions without doing $1 million worth of work.
Yeah, there's
I guess
definitely
Sting's trying to do with that buy rate.
There's always been that discussion about, a lot of people in wrestling, and it's one of those things in this country, because of the success of WWF in the last couple of years and the failure of WCW, have said that, the only successful way to promote wrestling is to have guys, to keep guys motivated is to give them, not guaranteed contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, that's like the most fallacious argument that I've ever heard, because the ECW guys, for the most part, were all on salary. I mean, although they didn't always get paid, but they were on salary. I mean, it wasn't like they got bonuses or anything. And those guys worked every bit as hard, if not, and maybe harder than the WWF guys. I mean, it's all the motivation level of the company. Nevertheless, there is something wrong with a company that, pays guys millions of dollars and then lets them get away with that. I mean, there's something screwed up about that. But I guess there is something screwed up because they're not in business anymore. Anyway, let's talk about Edmonton last night, which was the SmackDown tapings. And let's see, they had, as far as the Heat show goes, Test pinned the Big Show. So Mr. Big Show,
clean.
What?
I think it was clean.
Yeah, high kick to the face.
Sucks to be the Big Show.
Well, that's the deal. When I'll tell you one thing. When Jim Ross writes in the Ross Report that, you really need to drop some weight, I mean, you can get away with not doing it for a while, but sooner or later, if you don't, you're in trouble. Don't you? You know what I mean?
Here's the reason I kind of feel sorry for the Big Show. Big Show did a clean job last night, and Jim Ross always tells him he needs to lose some weight. But, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, Big Show was losing like every single night. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, he hadn't lost any weight. He was as unmotivated as ever. They just give him the hardcore title over Rhino.
Yeah, but the hardcore title doesn't mean anything. But you're right. And in the long run,
but he got a big win, and he beat a guy that was, doing a hell of a job.
Yeah.
How's it supposed to motivate this guy?
Yeah, and it did serve no purpose when you really look back at that, Rhino's got the belt back, and all that happened was the Big Show got a win, and then Jericho beat the Big Show, which forced his loss to Rhino, and he could have beaten the Big Show without the belt, and it would have accomplished exactly the same thing and wouldn't have had to lose to Rhino to get rid of that belt. So the whole purpose of it, if you look back, it served absolutely no purpose from getting the belt at all.
Nothing.
No. Steve Blackman beat Perry Saturn.
In fact, if anything, it hurt Rhino and it hurt Jericho.
I don't know that it didn't help Rhino, didn't help Jericho, and didn't help the Big Show either. So you're right. Steve Blackman, a lose-lose-lose situation. That's a good one. Steve Blackman beat Perry Saturn with a high kick, and Perry Saturn did the amnesia thing afterwards. Jerry Lynn beat Steven Richards, and Billy Gunn beat Val Venus. So SmackDown opened with Benoit and Jericho coming out. People were comparing the pop that they got to the pop that Bret Hart got at the Calgary Stampede pay-per-view in 1997. They said they just cheered and they wouldn't stop, and they probably would still be cheering now, except that they started their interview. And they came out and they basically said that they wanted to give Triple H and Steve Austin their rematch for the tag team titles, but with Triple H injured, they challenged Austin to get a new partner, Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon came out and said that while he would love to go in there and win the tag team titles, he had better things to do or other things to do, and he was busy. So Jericho then he told Jericho that he had to face Kurt Angle, and then he said that then Benoit asked for a match with Steve Austin, a rematch from the Raw match, and Vince said that Steve Austin had a deserved night off, and then Steve Austin came out and said that he didn't want the night off because he was sick and tired of people saying that he didn't beat Benoit clean, and he wanted to beat Benoit in his own hometown clean. So we got another main event.
Did Shawn Michaels ever do that, by the way?
What?
Come out and say, I'm sick of people saying I did beat Bret clean.
He didn't have a chance. Bret was gone.
Okay.
He brought out Bret, but they dressed up the midget?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one of those things. Remember they...
It was kind of sad because I got emails this weekend going, you think they'll bring out a midget for Stu? Everybody remembered that.
Well, it was in Wrestling with Shadows. It's one of the really compelling scenes that, after they promised they would never, make fun of him, they spent the last 4 years making fun of him.
Yep.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. Yeah, I did about 3 pages on that one last night. Oh boy. Anyway, I tell you what. Before we get on that, the thing on the Stampede website, it was like so. It's really sad. I mean, like the whole family is like drawn together, and except for it's like all I did was to buy.
Except for Brett and Ellie.
Not Ellie. You mean
or Brett and Martha? Sorry.
Martha. Yeah. So anyway.
Except for those two, the whole family's just one big happy family.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, let's see. So anyway, Austin and Benoit have a match, and that ends up being the main event, and it goes 24 minutes, the longest match, I believe, in the history of SmackDown, and it may have been the best match in the history of SmackDown, although, I don't know, it'd take a hell of a lot to beat last week's main event. We'll talk about that in just a second. Kane beat Edge to keep the Intercontinental title. Edge came out, and even though Edge, of course, is Canadian and they were in Canada, Edge explained that while he was born in Canada, he now lives in Tampa, Florida, and he basically talked about how horrible Canada is, how the weather's horrible, the women are horrible, and how great life is in Florida. Turn heel.
The border's horrible.
The border. Got a bunch of emails about the border. They, what was it? Going back. Now, Bryan, let me see if this is your experience. The basic gist of the border is going back to the United States is fine, but going to Canada is a pain, or no?
Usually, well, I always bring my Uncle Wayne and his wife Rose, and they wear their biker outfit and like the Road Warrior shoulder pads and everything like that, and we almost always get pulled over. And she's deaf mute, and so when he's doing like all the signing and everything, I think they assume that she must be an illegal alien that can't speak English, and they're trying to sneak into the country in their biker outfit. So we always get pulled over on the way up, but I've never really had a problem on the way back. And of course, last time on the way back, we got pulled over and the car searched, everything like that, on the way back to the U.S. So it's either side. Mostly, though, going up.
It's just when you get a guy who just thinks he looked the wrong way, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, they profile you and all that. Who used to get that was whenever you leave the country.
Ask you all the stupid questions. You got any guns, knives, fruit? That's my favorite. You bring any fruit up here?
I used to get the fruit one all the time from Mexico. The guy who used to always get stopped at the border. I mean, like always. Was Pillman. And the deal with Pillman was, and probably deservedly so, but Pillman, he used to joke to me that, like, there's a certain look that, like the border people are told to look out for. It's like, because it's kind of like, you fit all these descriptions. And he said that, like, it might as well just be his photo. You know what I mean? Of, a kind of muscular looking guy, with, long hair, looking like, you know what I mean?
Wearing the tank top, got the bag in the back.
Yeah, fanny pack, the whole bit.
Yep.
Anyway,
fanny pack.
So let's see. So anyway, Kane ends up beating Edge clean with a power bomb. Christian, of course, is off this week because of he's on his honeymoon, as a matter of fact. And I was told that Edge really didn't get much reaction. Once Edge did that promo, instead of people booing him, they just kind of didn't care. Then they had the Dudley Boys. They're setting up a Bubba Ray Dudley against Hardcore Bob Holly match, and Devon didn't want Spike at ringside, and Spike was trying to explain, like Molly's really nice, but, those brothers just do not listen to poor Spike. At least not yet. And anyway, Hardcore Holly won when Crash Holly tripped Bubba Ray Dudley as he tried to suplex into the ring, so that spot. And I actually heard that was a very good match. I heard it was one of the best matches on the show. Regal and Tajiri tell Vince McMahon that there is a limo circling the building with a license plate WCW1, which of course means that Vince tells those Canadian security guards that they better, they better be ready. And then Spike Dudley gets interviewed, and Spike said that it was not Molly's fault what happened on Raw, which of course, as we know, it was not Molly's fault. And he told Molly, I like you very much. Now that's a little too corny. This has been really corny and campy, but that's just a little too much for me. I don't know. Maybe he delivers.
I guess we'll have to
really
see how the delivery is.
Yeah, you're right. Vince McMahon, of course, tells the security people. Then Kurt Angle comes out, and this was really weird. I talked to a couple people after the match, and they were all talking about, like, this is so weird if Chris Jericho is getting a title shot, because they had a match with Angle, and Angle has him in the ankle lock, so he basically has him beat. Shane McMahon comes out, and security grabs Shane, so Shane's interference is thwarted. But the referee is busy with Shane, and then Spike Dudley runs in and does the Dudley, what's the Dudley Dong? The acid drop?
That's right.
We can't, the Dudley Dong. Dog? I don't know. Whatever they call that move, which Ross never calls it, and actually since it's on SmackDown, Michael Cole and Taz call all the moves right. Whereas I think Ross just like, if it's a dumb name for a move, I think he really just doesn't feel like calling it. Have you ever noticed that?
That's exactly what I do in the newsletter. If I think his name's stupid, I don't even write it.
Oh. I just try to keep up on the moves.
Except Dudley Dong, because that's a classic.
Yeah, so anyway, he gives Angle that, and Angle gets pinned by Jericho after a lion salt. So it basically took two guys to help Chris Jericho win a match that he was about to lose. And, Shane didn't even, it wasn't even Shane's interference. It was Spike Dudley. So, what the hell? Kurt Angle then gets mad at Steve Regal, or William Regal, and demands a match at King of the Ring. Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon, which we already talked about, and Shane is training for that big match. And the one thing, it's really weird. How can Regal order a match with the guy from another company, theoretically, right? Shane McMahon.
Well, Shane's still with he's still with the WWF. He's Vince's kid. He just happens to own the other company.
Okay, well, then that's a reason. Okay, Rhino
Vince
beat
owns
Raven.
the XFL, and he was still with the WWF. Regal could sign him to matches.
That's true. Okay, Rhino beat Raven in a hardcore title match, and I heard that was better than usual. Probably Raven came up with some innovative spots. I actually heard that was a pretty good match. Then they did another segment. The thing throughout the show is that everybody's trying to tell Austin that he shouldn't wrestle Benoit in his hometown. It's bad news. He's risking too much. And Austin's mad at everyone because they don't have confidence in him. And even Deborah questions him. And he's, your own wife is telling you that you can't beat Chris Benoit. That's pretty sad.
What a heel.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. Then the Hardy Boys are together, and Matt and Lita start kissing, and Eddie Guerrero walks in. And Eddie Guerrero and Matt Hardy start getting into an argument. I don't even remember what about. But anyway, they start arguing. And it leads to a match with X Factor, all three of them, with Albert, and beating Eddie Guerrero and the Hardys. What happens is Eddie Guerrero gets thrown out of the ring somehow, and he's injured. So Lita goes and tends to Eddie. While this is going on, Albert gives the Baldo bomb to Matt Hardy and pins him. And then Matt Hardy is mad at Lita because instead of Lita watching his back, she was tending to Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie Guerrero and Matt Hardy argue some more. So they're still going at it. And then we had Chris Benoit and Steve Austin for the WWF title. 23 minutes and 45 seconds. I've had reports ranging from 4 to 5 stars, mostly in the 4.5 range. So it's a hell of a match. Some people said it was the greatest match they had ever seen in Edmonton. And many, great, one of the best matches ever on SmackDown. It's a match not to be missed. And at one point, Chris Benoit does 10 German suplexes in a row on Steve Austin and puts on the crossface. And I guess the crowd just goes absolutely bonkers at that. And at that point, Vince McMahon is the outside the ring referee. Earl Hebner is the inside the ring referee. Vince McMahon tries to interfere. He tries to hit Chris Benoit with a chair. Benoit gets out of the way. He ends up hitting Earl Hebner with a chair. Benoit ends up getting the chair and hits Vince McMahon 7 times with a chair. And then, as it turns out, while that's going on, Austin sneaks up from behind Benoit and schoolboys him, holding the tights. And Earl Hebner recovers and counts the pin. So Steve Austin gets a win over Benoit in great match. So, anything more to add to any of that?
This is like the first show in a long time that I'm just dying to see.
I was dying to see last week's show because of the TLC.
I was excited to see that one, but I don't know. I want to see this one.
Yeah. Well, they've been putting on great main events and really good television. So, no ratings today.
That Undertaker's a damn hard worker, but ever since he got into the main events, the shows have gotten so much better.
Yep.
And that is no coincidence.
Well, there's 2 things that have happened. I mean, number one is they started booking main events again. Remember that whole thing where they would book the 1-minute match and the 3-minute match and the DQ? I mean, they're booking real matches. They're having, pretty much, not always clean finishes. Obviously, Monday was anything but they're giving them, even Monday's match was like 12 minutes long. This one's 24. The SmackDown tables, ladders, and chairs was right about 20. The match the previous Monday was, 15, 16? I forget exactly, but something like that. I mean, they're giving the main events time, and they're putting matches in the main event that on paper, when you look at them and go, okay, we're going to put Steve Austin against Chris Benoit and give him 24 minutes. On paper, forgetting like sometimes, you get disappointed, but when you look at that on paper, you go, that's a pretty good bet. Rather than like, we're going to have Undertaker and Steve Austin, we're going to have them go 1 minute and it's going to be a DQ finish. That's not a good bet. So,
Yeah.
So they're doing the right thing. Hopefully the ratings will start reflecting it. This was the reaction to Raw on Monday. 30% excellent, 41% good, 7% average, 12% bad, 10% didn't see the show, so it's pretty darn good reviews for that. And then today's poll question has to do with what do you think so far of the push of Benoit and Jericho? A, it's been a huge positive. B, it's made for some good matches, but they're not going to help business. And C, it has made no difference. So you can vote on that.
You know, one of the things is the fact that they had these last two shows in Canada, and these guys are getting such incredible pops. I mean, fans are going to see this on TV, and because it's not being portrayed as like a U.S. versus Canada angle, they're just going to see these guys getting this enormous reaction, and it's perceptually, it's like, wow, you know, maybe these guys really are supers. I think it's going to help a lot.
I think it's going to help a lot. I think that they lucked into the scheduling. And you know what? And in hindsight, you got to give them credit because it really was better that they did the move in San Jose. Because even though if they had done the match in Calgary, the San Jose match in Calgary, yeah, it would have gotten a huge pop, and then Edmonton would have gotten a huge pop. But instead, when these guys came back, they were already conquering heroes, and we're seeing a week of TV where Benoit and Jericho are, as close to the Rock as they had as baby faces in a while. And hopefully, I mean, Monday in Minneapolis, the Target Center is going to be a big test. But I think that, put it this way, what else could you do? You've given the fans, those guys, they're getting great reactions on TV, and they're having awesome matches on TV. So, I mean, if the fans in Minneapolis don't react, I mean, I don't know what to do other than, I don't know what to do. I mean, they're doing the best they can. What?
Keep trying.
Yeah, you got to give it. Yeah.
Is perceptually a word, by the way? I had that whole speech, and I think I said a word that wasn't a word.
Perceptually. I don't know.
We'll get emails.
It's from Bob Naylor, who goes, the match of the night tonight, and that's going to be on the UPW show, will be Super Dragon versus Juventud Guerrera. Dragon broke in with Blitzkrieg, which I remember that. I remember when they all broke in, American Wild Child and all of them. I feel the match will easily top the Blitzkrieg Juventud Guerrera match from Spring Stampede 99.
Oh, that's saying
easily
something.
Top. Oh boy, that's a tough one. That was one of the best matches WCW had. Have you heard if Paulie is still pushing to get the FBI in WCW? Yes, he is. I heard Tony Mamaluke moved to New York, so the two will be doing more indies, but just wondering for anything new. I mean, I've heard nothing new really about WCW at all since, the time I talked to Vince McMahon. There really hasn't been any changes. And he goes, also, have you seen last week's Jay Briscoe versus Mark Briscoe match? I don't have the tape, and I got another email about that just a few minutes ago as well. I saw the tape of the CZW show from the week before, and I saw the Briscoes in a six-man tag, but I have not seen their singles match. He goes, and then Bob says, I put this match up there not only with any independent match this year, but any match on any WWF television show this year. You need to check it out if you've yet to do so. It's just incredible. In no way is it just a spot fest. Good pacing, transition, and story. I'll tell you what, I watched those guys, Spanish announce team, the Briscoes, from the week before, and I was very, very impressed. And, I feel that, like, any knocking of those guys, for what they can't do, is so ungodly unfair because you're talking about guys that are like, teenagers basically. And it's like, you know what I mean? There's obviously going to be weaknesses in guys that have only been wrestling for a short period of time, but for the period of time they've been wrestling, they are unbelievably good. I mean, I wouldn't say just good. They are unbelievably good. And, if they don't, and if they don't get hurt, I think the Briscoes are going to make it. The other guys, they don't have that major league look, which, you know what I mean? You know how that goes, especially now, and it's more important now than ever because there's only one company and they're looking for that look. But the Briscoe kids, they're 16 and 17, and I think they got a super future. This is from Elliot, who goes, I was wondering how were the Korea shows in 1995 in terms of the quality of the wrestling? I know about the huge crowd, but it would be a good show to pick up otherwise. The wrestling on those shows was nothing. Do you remember the two shows, the Collision and Korea thing, Brian?
I don't remember all the matches on them now.
As I recall, the matches were nothing great. Antonio Inoki and Ric Flair was like 2.5 star type match. I think that Chris Benoit and Too Cold Scorpio had a pretty good match, and the Steiners may have had a good match, but it's nothing. The only thing big was the crowd. It was nothing like unbelievable. The best matches, actually, now that I think about it, were the two women's matches. The women's matches were very, very good. So, they were good. Let's see. Will WCW be maintaining its relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling now it's under WF ownership? No. Would you bring in Shelton Benjamin before Brock Lesnar? Probably. If
now?
they don't bring him in, I wouldn't bring either of them in now. But I mean,
well,
of
if
the
you had
two
to bring
of them,
one in now, I'd bring in Shelton first. But who knows? 6 months from now.
Brock could. Yeah. You don't know how quick guys are going to improve and everything. But right now, it looks like Shelton Benjamin's on the fast track. Let's see. With Triple H at the picture, will the Big Show finally get the push he deserves? He's getting the push he deserves. I know. Let's see. Why aren't the Ballards signed to a WWF contract yet? Too short, don't have a major league look. Certainly not their work. They're very good workers. Let's see. Watching Raw got me thinking, with Jericho winning the Hardcore title for 1 minute, does that make him the only wrestler to have held every single title in the WWF? I don't consider that he's ever held the world title. So, no. Although both his WWF title and Jericho never held the world title. What
about the light heavyweight title?
Never held that either. Good point. Although both the WWF title and Hardcore title reigns were mere moments, asterisk-wise, Jericho is the only man to have held every title available to him, discounting the light heavyweight title. Okay, that's right. I know Triple H won the tag team titles. They made mention of his Grand Slam. I'm guessing Jericho, until Jericho has a real reign as WWF, they won't mention it. And even then, if they may not mention it. Who knows? How are UFC tickets going? As of a couple of days ago, they had sold 2,096 tickets, so that's not good. That the Meadowlands is interesting because they're doing King of the Ring at the Meadowlands on the 24th and then UFC at the Meadowlands on the 29th. So I don't know if WWF sold out the Meadowlands yet for King of the Ring. I haven't heard. Let's see. With Benoit starting a feud with Austin, has the WWF decided to do a Benoit-Austin King of the Ring main event? No, it's still Jericho last I heard, unless something has changed in the last day.
The way things change, you never know.
Yeah.
Especially lately.
I wouldn't do a 24-minute match on television before the pay-per-view. That would be something you would save for the pay-per-view.
It's just one of those things where, they may not be planning on that right now, and they put the 24 match on TV, and all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe we should go with this. And then they've already put on TV.
They could, because they haven't committed their hand on anything on this pay-per-view, really, except for, Shane and Kurt Angle and Undertaker and the Stalker. So, they could... If Benoit was planned to win King of the Ring, let's just say, we don't know that, and Jericho was planned against Austin, they could flip-flop them, no problem. No one knows the wiser. Bruce Mitchell's on the line, but let me just finish this question really quick. I personally would love to see Benoit keep losing due to Vince and then have the referee ban Vince at King of the Ring and have Benoit finally win the title. Make a story there. Bruce, how are you today?
Doing just fine.
Good. Bruce Mitchell of Pro Wrestling Torch. And what are your thoughts? God, wrestling, we haven't had you on in a while, and like every new guest, it's entirely new business. What's your thoughts on the business right now?
It's really scary business to me. I mean, it's all the eggs, to coin the cliche, are in one basket, and that basket doesn't seem to be doing real well. I mean, that just every week you see another sign that the business is going down, and that rating trend is just scary. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I mean, they're freshening up stuff, and maybe it'll turn back, but you wonder whether this is, a couple of years ago, it was a really big, wrestling was a very big fad, and very big fads go away, and that's kind of the scary part.
Well, wrestling has been a fad many, many times, and it's gone away from being a fad many, many times, but somehow it's been around for 100 or so years.
But it's never been one real, one real company and some offshoot companies, and that's the part that I think is really scary. Plus the fact that internationally, it just seems like the next big trend doesn't seem that clear. As usually, there seems to be, there's always another trend on the horizon, and this time I don't know what it is.
You're right.
Well, he's trying to start a trend, but
that one won't catch on here.
Yeah,
because really the only one who understands, it's this trend that only Inoki understands.
Yeah, that one would take a long time. I don't know. I mean, it would have to.
It won't happen here
to translate here, and I don't know.
I mean, the one thing, the difference, with Japan is that in Japan, whether they think wrestling is real or not, there has always been a fascination of, like the reality aspects of wrestling. And here, there was a fascination at one point with this. And that Inoki mindset thing, I don't doubt that, like in the 70s and the 80s, that thing could work, that type of a thing could work here, like kind of making it more reality-based and everything. Because they, a lot of the successful promoters try to make it kind of realistic. But, like now when we've gotten so far to the entertainment thing and people know it's entertainment, when there's something that they know is real, they don't really even necessarily like it. And, Brawl for All was the perfect example. It was like, it was real. Everyone knew it was real, but they didn't care it was real. I mean, they really didn't. It was just like, we just want our fake stuff. Basically, was what it was.
Well, they want their fake, everyone wants their fake stuff, and I understand that, but the problem also is if there was new fake stuff coming, if there was, if everything hadn't been burned out so fast, that's the other thing that's kind of scary is, the only logical place to go is back to the reality-based stuff, and that's too difficult. But the other way, they're having a hard time coming up with new stuff because we've seen all of it. And it doesn't help that they keep trying to replay, one particular pay-per-view main event, and, Survivor Series main event. But, I mean, we're seeing the same stuff over and over again, even in the storylines, and that's not good. And I don't know where, you can't take it, the sex route anymore. We've seen all that. We've seen all the violence. We've seen the hardcore, the stunts, everything else, and it's really hard to ratchet it even further.
What we're seeing now is great main events.
That's true.
Yeah.
For the last
the thing
for 2 weeks.
The Brawl for All is, I just want to go back to that. They didn't have any big names in there,
Well, that's
what did Bradshaw
that's
really mean? Why would people care about Bradshaw and the Godfather punching each other?
Or Saudi Arabia.
Instead of doing takedowns.
If they care
what does Kendo Kashin mean over there? It doesn't mean anything as far as a shoot fight. People don't care. They care about, talking to them.
No, Kendo Kashin over there meant something as far as a shoot fight when he went in.
Until he lost.
One of the things, I think Fujita and Takayama would have showed there, these aren't even necessarily huge. They're named pro wrestlers, but they're not giant name pro wrestlers. The idea of two pro wrestlers from competing organizations, and they don't even have to be big stars, but fighting for real, that's a big ticket seller there. And it wouldn't necessarily be here,
Yeah, because we don't have.
Then again, I don't know. Maybe in the if you go 3 years ago, if they had done a thing where you had a WWF guy and a WCW guy. What? What'd you say?
How about Bischoff and Vince when Bischoff promised it?
It would have sold pay-per-views. They had that weird thing. If Bischoff, and Zbyszko did a little bit of business, so Bischoff and Vince would have done business if people thought it was in that venue, in like a neutral venue. And that's one of the things that Pride works so well at is because it's neutral grounds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one that we can just thank God never happened. Because then we would have had to watch it. That would have been rough.
It would have been ugly. It would have been ugly, and it would have been fast.
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened, but it would not have been good to see those two men in their 40s and 50s getting tired really fast doing a real fight. That would have not have been a pretty sight.
Not at all.
But it would have drawn money. And one of them would have... It would have,
one of those things that it would draw money, and then the people that had paid the money would have been like, "What was I thinking?"
Those two guys about 20 seconds in, that's what they'd be saying.
Yeah.
This is going like, "I'm a billionaire. What am I doing?"
Exactly.
But you know what? Now that he bought the company, it would be considered a legendary fight.
It'd be legendary.
It's like an Ovi and Ollie.
Like an Ovi, that's right. Here it is, 25.
Yeah. Legendary.
That one didn't quite reach those levels.
Yeah, okay.
but Andre and Hogan. Andre and Hogan was absolutely horrible, and enough time has passed to where, to the people who didn't see it, and even to some people who did, it's like it wasn't that horrible.
Yep.
Oh, let's see what else we got here. This is from Ryan Briggs, who says, seeing as how wrestling is getting a bad rap in the mainstream press today, something is going to be needed to change people's perception of the sport. So in the spirit of being theoretical, what three guys in the wrestling industry would you like to have join you on a wrestling panel discussing the business on a show like Politically Incorrect, and we can immediately disqualify Roddy Piper? And Lou Albano, by the way.
Rock, and...
This includes workers past and present, anyone from the wrestling industry that you think are good representatives. Foley, for sure. I don't know about Rock.
When
I saw Rock with Bozell, he left himself open to some big openings that you don't want a smart guy to give you, whereas Foley's a lot quicker.
Well, someone you guys have on this show a lot, I think could do it. If you had the star, then I'd want Les Thatcher.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I really would.
He's a good spokesperson.
Who wasn't a star, who's well-spoken, who has been around for a long, long time. like do that. Now, I mean, he says wrestling gets a bad rap in the media. Sometimes I think wrestling gets the rap it deserves. I don't necessarily would say there are unfair things that happen. Lionel Tate, the biggest example. Really unfair things that happen, but there are also things that they walk right into, and that's more the problem to me. You take care of it.
And many times they get a free pass too, because they're wrestling.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it evens itself out. It's.
I was really impressed with Foley on the clip on the Today Show. To me, they found the guy that they need to send around. It's not Vince. It's Foley, and he was very good.
It's not Vince, and it's not Linda either.
Yeah,
it's Foley.
Linda's okay for those business shows because
she's good. She's very good on those business shows, but not for like the Today Show. She's too dry.
Right. Those business shows, you can be a dry business person. You look like you're a competent business person, but when they need somebody that is like appealing and likable, it's Foley.
Mick Foley with his poo shirt. I think Mick Foley will probably be tomorrow night on this show wearing that poo shirt for good luck. So. He read the book. He always talks about that. Mike Rubin says, do you think it's possible that Bret Hart and Vince McMahon will ever do a match against each other? Imagine the interest. Is it conceivable, or is there still too much heat? Well,
they live on the same planet. So it's conceivable. And they're both alive.
Yeah. You never want to say never. And what's funny is like I say no time soon, but 6 weeks in wrestling is a lifetime, but no time soon. No time soon. Let's see.
No time in the next 6 weeks.
I hope not. I'll say that.
No. And really, you know what? I really don't. I just don't ever see it happening. I really don't see it happening. I just don't. For one, I just don't see Bret Hart wrestling again. I don't think he wants to. I mean, the thing is, he's not going to be broke because he saved his money, so he doesn't need to come back, and he doesn't have that emotional. When he walked away. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't look back, but compared to most, a lot of these guys in wrestling, when they retire, they still like work in the business, and then that bug hits them. Like Ricky Choshu, who really didn't ever want to come back, but it was kind of like business wants you back, and fans start wanting him back, and you just kind of get dragged back in there, and sometimes it's not a good idea. Or guys who are broke. Well, go ahead.
I mean, he had a bad, that last year or so, starting from, the end of his time in the WWF and all through WCW. I mean, he had a very bad time in the wrestling business, and it can't be. He kind of had his long goodbye in a bad way. So that's got to be still. I can't imagine that he's forgotten all that and wants to go back to the glory. I think he learned a lot.
I want to get to a couple of more emails, and we'll start with the phone calls. This is from John, who goes, I cannot believe I'm admitting this, but at the end of Raw on Monday, I actually thought that Bret Hart was going to make an appearance. Now, there's a reason. I want to bring this up. I'll keep it, because it goes, trust me, I know you're laughing. I'm not laughing, because that's what the whole TV show was designed for you to believe. That's the emotion you're supposed to have. And my phone was ringing throughout that entire show. My phone rarely rings during Raw, because people know not to call. And it was people going like, I know Bret's coming. The minute they showed Stu on TV and showed that Bret Hart clip from the King of the Ring, everybody was like, I know Bret's coming in. And then they did the Survivor Series thing. So, I mean, the table was set perfectly. And actually, something I want to talk to Bruce and Bryan about in just a second, but we'll go finish this email, was Too Many Small Items, the King of the Ring clip. Was that shown live? Yes, it was. When they came back to Calgary, I thought it would be a deafening pop, but that was not the case. One question before I go. Hogan or Bret, who in your mind would appear on Raw anytime soon? Oh, I would say Hogan for sure. Yeah, no question. Now, here's the thing. For Monday night, because I've been thinking about exactly what they did. There are basically two schools of thought. Probably more than two. But the basic thing is why they did what they did on Monday night. It was either the idea and the atmosphere that they set the table for, and you could just tell even with some comments by Heyman and everything, that show was designed to get the average person thinking that the end of this show is going to have Bret Hart come out and punch Vince McMahon. I mean, it was totally set up for people to think that. Now, was that something that was done purely for ratings, just, with the idea that, there are a lot of people who've waited 4 years for that, for that magic moment, so to speak? Or was that thing just to rub it in Bret Hart's face? Or a little of both?
I think his family was there to rub it in his face. And I don't personally think that Bret Hart coming out now would do as much as it would have done any time in the past, just because it's been so long now.
But in
97
Calgary
was 4
it would.
years
In
ago.
Calgary it would.
Yeah, and I think Vince, the fact that Vince did it means that Vince, in his mind, must still believe that if Brett came out of the audience today, they would draw $1 million on pay-per-view or whatever. And I'm sure that's why he did it. He probably figured everyone else thought that too.
Okay. Bruce, you think it's more the latter?
Yeah,
Just
I
want to rub
really
in his
do. I
face.
think that I just think that that Vince still is mad about that. The family was there. He wanted to show them up in Calgary, and I just don't see that. The rating. Well, maybe people would think that, maybe they wouldn't. But
I guess we'll find out. We'll find out when we get the quarters on that thing.
Right, and they usually don't build up things that they're not going to have. It never occurred to me.
And that's bad policy to do it too.
Yeah, it is. It's a bad policy to do it, and I don't see where you get your money from it. You get, at the most you get one night's rating and a bunch of disappointed people. What I thought they actually were going to do was, and just knowing the Bret Hart situation, and if you followed it, it just wasn't possible for Bret Hart to be there. I mean, I can't, like all of a sudden he had that kind of a change of heart, and they had that kind of a change of heart towards him. But I thought what they were going to do was they did the screw job thing in Canada 4 years ago. They were going to turn around and have Vince have Earl Hebner, because I thought that was why they said Earl Hebner at the beginning. Earl Hebner was going to show that he had, integrity, as wrestling officials, usually do, and was going to stop Vince McMahon, and Benoit would win, and they would kind of reverse, in the same market, they would reverse the finish. Instead of doing the exact same finish again, I thought Benoit would win. I thought that's what they were setting up, and I thought that was what Heyman's comments were setting up more than anything.
I thought Earl was going to go in there and hold Vince up for a new raise to be like the first $1 million referee.
He's on his way.
Let's see. This is from Scott Foy, who says, "I have the awful feeling that the stalker is going to be." This is an awful feeling. The Big Boss Man.
Oh my God, no.
Vince has always liked the Big Boss Man. Yeah, he's healthy and he's ready, and they haven't figured out what to do with him. He's been gone long enough that he can be considered a fresh face. So he's only going to be a fresh face for about 2 weeks at most. And despite the fact he's been stale for years, it wouldn't surprise me to see Vince stick him in the semi-main event feud. Would you sign Chris Hamrick? Would you sign Chris Hamrick for the new WCW? I personally would not. No offense to Chris Hamrick, I just don't think that he's what they need. They have a lot of good workers. They got plenty of good workers. They need and they're young, and Chris is not young. Although Chris is a good bump taker. I mean, as far as like a guy to go on TV as an enhancement talent, maybe.
That's what I was kind of thinking. If you're going to have a few jobbers, then I'd want them. If you're not going to, the old style. If you're not going to, I don't know that I'd want them.
I don't think that they're doing that, though.
Yeah.
This is a question for Bruce. He goes, "My wife-to-be is a second-grade teacher and has some wrestling fans in her class. Since you're also an elementary school teacher, how do you discuss wrestling with your students, at least those who like wrestling, for example? What do you do when you notice a student does something or says something that obviously was influenced by wrestling?"
It depends on the context of it. For instance, if they're on the playground, I discourage them from doing it, and pretty much I know all the moves now from watching it and all that, because it's just not the right place for it. If it's, if they're doing, this is an outdated thing, but if they were doing the suck it move, then I would discipline them or talk to them or whatever and try to discourage it from them. But unless it's a distraction, then I don't say anything, because the reality is a lot of the kids that I teach are wrestling fans or were wrestling fans, and there are times when I'll use that to my advantage, because if students think that you know what they like or you have some understanding of it, you can use that to strengthen the bond sometimes. But I'll talk to them about it, about is it real? I'll ask them, is it real, and kind of discuss that if I think they're getting too close to it. Sometimes I just tell them they need to go to bed and get up the next morning, not stay up till 11:30. So that's another thing. That's probably.
Does that work?
We had what's called end of grade testing, this big standardized test that they had, and I basically sent a letter home and said, tell your kid, make sure that your children are in bed and aren't watching Monday Night Wrestling. And it worked for some of them, and some of them it didn't, and the ones I wish it worked for could have worked for, but that makes a difference as much as anything. I'm sure I taught second grade last year. Second graders that stayed up till 11:30 on Monday night were jacked up by the Raw main event, or it wasn't the Nitro main event, but the Raw main event.
They quit watching Nitro in '98, like everybody else.
They weren't always that easy to deal with the next day, but it's a matter of what they're doing and in context of what they're doing. But I don't let them don't let them demonstrate wrestling holds on the playground just because, not because I think they're in any kind of danger, because I really don't. I just from experience know that fake fights turn into real fights, and I just assume avoid that if I could.
Couldn't you just have a day in class where you teach them all how to program the VCR?
We'll have to teach the parents how to program the VCR. I know.
I got two quick questions. One is,
no one pays any attention to me when I say that.
Okay.
It's like tape the show.
When they had like the dog show and stuff, were the kids staying up till 1:30?
You know what? There were some that stayed
that's
up
scary.
late. But I mean, didn't they do the show kind of backwards then, like they did the old Saturday Night main events? They put
Yeah, the
more
main
at the
event.
beginning.
No, not all of them.
No, the main event was at the end of the show on those, weren't those?
That's right. There was one or two that, like, because I would ask the next day. I made it, and I was real sneaky about it. I would just ask the kids that I knew watched wrestling, what was the main event last night? If they told me the main event, I knew they stayed up. And so what happened in the what happened in the main event last night? Oh, Stone Cold did blah blah. So it's like, I knew that they had stayed up. I mean, it's not. I don't encourage it, and it's not good for them. And I really think it's a teacher's influence and a parent's influence to like have some sense about what time, what your kids are watching and when they're watching it, and put it into some context for them.
We're going to go to the phones. We're going to start with Fred in Boston. Fred, what's up?
Hello.
Hey there.
Fred.
Hi, guys. I love the show and the site, and I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into them.
Thank you very much.
My question to you, Dave, concerns WWF developmental territories. I'm looking into some wrestling schools right now, and I think it might be a big advantage to go to a school that has an official WWF affiliation, like an OVW or UPW. And I've been told that Les Thatcher's HWA is about to become the next WWF developmental territory, and that's a school that's pretty high on my list. However, I since read in the Torch this week, actually, that the WWF is not going to expand their developmental operations, which means no new schools or no new territories are going to be added to the WWF roster. And I was wondering if you could clear that up for me, if you know the scoop on that.
I don't know why they would add any new places right now. I mean, they are talking about overhauling it though, and I don't know what that means. But they don't, between the Memphis and OVW and Puerto Rico and to a lesser extent UVW, they've got enough. So I don't see them adding Heartland. Although if like Les has Les Thatcher, like with Craig Zellner or Ray Steele, if he's got a student that's good, they're going to know about it because, he talks to Jim Ross and he talks to Jim Cornette. And
they do those joint shows, too, with OVW.
They do exactly. They do joint shows. So, you'll get it, you'll be in the loop, so to speak. If you're good enough, they'll find you. Right. If you train with Les Thatcher. But I don't know that they're going to. I mean, I haven't heard anything about them adding Heartland as a developmental territory, and I don't think that I would almost guess that they won't, because I think they've got what they need. I think they've got what they need pretty much now, because they're not running around, one of the things that happened, and one of the reasons that they signed so many developmental guys was also so they could, like, anyone who they thought had potential on the indies or a good athlete that wanted to get in, I mean, they were rushing to sign them so WCW wouldn't get them. That need is no longer there. So they've really, they haven't really added a lot of guys on developmental deals of late, and it's going to be harder to get a developmental deal now because the WWF doesn't feel the need to sign someone before somebody else gets them.
Right. They can kind of work at their own pace. They're not really facing any competition. Okay, well, thanks for answering my question.
Okay, you're very welcome. Let's see. When the WWF first started, did they say that Buddy Rogers won the title in a tournament in Rio de Janeiro? Yes, they did. It's from Andrew McMahon, who says, who and what was the name of the guy who looked like a pirate wearing a hockey mask in New Japan? Jeez. Let's bring up New Japan's most horrible angles. The Gaspar brothers, which one was Daryl Carolette, and the other was Bob Orton Jr., who was actually a hell of a worker.
God, I totally.
They were in for. Do you remember the Pirates, the Gaspars?
Yeah, I do.
That was
he
like
wasn't a hell of a worker by that time, as I recall, though.
No, Bob was pretty good. Daryl Carolette was pretty terrible. He was what name did Daryl Carolette wrestle in WCW? Nitron, right? Was that his name? Skywalker Nitron?
I thought Nitron was the guy in the X-Men movie.
Yeah. They're all the same guy.
So that was Daryl Carolette, he's Sabretooth in the X-Men movie?
Yeah, Daryl Carroll at
Wow, I didn't
Sabretooth.
realize that. I knew it was Night.
Yeah, I think he uses the name Tyler Maine now, but that's obviously Tyler Maine is a fake name.
Gosh, who would have thought?
Yep, that was New Japan's version of TL Hopper, I think, as far as one of those gimmicks that about a year later, when they look back and they go, "We did this."
Yeah.
So, Bruce, before we had a break, I want to ask you about something because you, of course, live in Greensboro, which is the heart of the old Jim Crockett territory. And, you've been a long-time wrestling fan, and you have a lot of friends who were long-time wrestling fans dating back to, the days of Johnny Valentine and when Ric Flair first broke in Wahoo and all them. And a lot of them, it was always the home team, and then WCW kind of killed the territory as a home team and all that. How do you view, and how do the people view the actual death of the WCW company, and what do you think it's going to take for... Because obviously WCW's lost those people. WWF's lost those people. Do you think it's possible for WWF to do something to get them back?
Yeah, I think it is possible, but I think they'd have to open the bank book, and I think they would really have to make some moves that politically they don't want to make. And specifically, I know that everyone says this one name, and I think they'd have to have him. Bill Goldberg. They'd have to have Bill Goldberg. They'd have to have Ric Flair. They would have to have some of the people there. And I know the idea going around is Ric Flair managing Bill Goldberg, but my version of that, and you talk about a political nightmare, but it would get people's attention, is Eric Bischoff managing Bill Goldberg.
That could do business.
Yeah, and I think,
it really could.
I think that as much as Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan and all that really frustrated the home team older fans from this area and from the Mid-Atlantic area that followed Ric Flair the whole way, and a lot of the fans in this area that followed Ric Flair that whole way, and they went out of their way to stick it to them. People still watched to see what Flair was up to, what Flair was doing, and they didn't necessarily like it here, but they would watch it. And when they treated him with some respect and they did it right, they'd go out to see him. But I just think even at the end they would still watch to see him. But that last show when Vince stuck it in their face, when Vince came out and said, hey, I'm on your network, Billionaire Ted, I won, I did, and just, did that over and over again. There are some fans that never really got to Stone Cold Steve Austin as their home team or Rock as their home team. And those fans were still watching WCW, as horrible as it was. And they really stuck it to those fans. I think that was a mistake. And I think saying it's Shane McMahon's WCW, well, that's no one's idea of WCW. And I don't mean anything bad about Shane McMahon. He's a good performer and a smart guy, but I just think it's a bad mix. They've got to get some people in, but they've got to get some people in who mean WCW, but they've also got to stay away from the cancers. And that's a very tough balance to make.
We're going to go to Chris in Massachusetts. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing really good, Chris.
Good. First of all, I wasn't going to this. Something came to me after the last caller. He was talking about wrestling schools. He's from Boston. He should look into Kowalski's school, definitely. I went through Kowalski's school a few years ago, and I got hurt, and I had to drop out. And when I went back, in between, Mike Hollow, who's the head instructor, is a veteran of a couple of WWF dojos, and he really runs the school very, very well now as far as, they do a lot of the same drills and everything that he learned under Dory Funk through the dojo. So given that the odds of getting, noticed are, the odds are 1,000,000 to 1 against you anyway. Why uproot your entire life? If he's local, he can go to Kowalski's website, which is, I believe it's killerkowalskis, plural.com. And he can email them, and they'll give him information for the school. So,
how'd you get hurt?
Huh?
How'd you get hurt?
Man, I went into it, and I'm actually going to try to go back. I actually saw Kowalski a few weeks ago. I actually had the honor of driving him to the Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame introduction dinner there in Schenectady. So it was actually...
How was that?
Well, first of all, it was a first class. There were hundreds of people there, Dave. I was very, very... I didn't know what to expect going in, but I went down with a couple of people, one of the referees, Kowalski, and a friend of his, and, we drove down, and I had Kowalski in my front seat, man, and I was just peppering him with questions. 3 hours down, 3 hours back. It was awesome. But, you could learn a lot of history talking to a guy like Kowalski's a super guy. And geez, you should have him on the show sometime. Actually, he had some great stories, and it was awesome.
Did you ask him about China?
In her book?
You know what? I didn't bring it up out of I didn't. I asked him about a lot of things, and Rich, one of his referees, who was actually Triple H's first ref and also Kurt Angle's first ref, he's been with Kowalski for a while, and Kowalski asked us if either one of us had read China's book, and I was just like, uh-oh. And I told him no. I said out of respect for him.
You should have said yes, it was horrible.
Oh, you know what? I was so incensed, and I think I called in, Dave, one time and talked to you about that, but let's just say I couldn't repeat what Walter said about China.
Oh?
I could probably repeat it, but I wouldn't want my mother listening. You know, I don't have much respect for her. Let's leave it at that. And I don't know. I think he was hurt by what she said, and he basically, Dave, you had told the story about how Nash called Walter about China. You know, basically, you had told that story a long time ago, which he backed up in that Calgary newspaper interview. And I think obviously we know what the real story is as far as that goes, but you know how she got discovered and everything. But it was he's not real.
Imagine taking Nash's word over China's.
Huh? What?
Hey, one thing I'll say about Nash is a hell of a lot better writer.
That's true. Hey, that is damn true. You know,
and I mean, and she had a ghostwriter. Nash did it himself. I mean, you know, Nash. What was that thing that Nash wrote a couple weeks ago? I mean, like, you know, no matter what you want to say about Nash, I read that thing and I go, you know, this guy, he's a pretty clever writer.
Yeah,
he's clever and he's a good writer.
Well, that actually segues nicely into my first point. Did you guys see the comments that Nash made regarding Honky Tonk Man?
I haven't seen them, but I actually gotten some emails about them, so I was wondering what were they?
Well,
I guess they must have just come out.
He used, the first thing he did was he talked about, well, he threw in his usual heat-seeking line that he always does about the old-timers, about how, you know, Honky Tonk's obviously one of these guys who didn't save his money, and, you know, I mean, you know, please.
You know what's funny, real quick about that, though? You know, Honky's only a couple of years older than Nash.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I mean, it's only like 5-year difference, I think.
Right. Well, the one thing that he said that kind of bothered me was he initially said, I think he was, you know, I agree, too, that Nash is an interesting writer, but one of the things this was one of the 3 things on the list to talk to you about, was that he mentioned how he never really knew Honky Tonk Man, but he had a tremendous amount of respect for him because he showed up unsolicited at a benefit show. And what I wanted to ask you, Dave, is you had put something in the Observer a while back. It was months after, I think, the first Pillman show, where Nash did a big promo in the ring and talked about, I don't know, it was like $10,000 or $20,000. And you had an item in there, probably after talking to Thatcher or whatever, where you had mentioned that it was like months later, and Nash...
Nash never paid.
Yeah.
I mean, he never did. He never did, no.
Yeah, okay. That's one of the things I want to ask you about, because I think it's pretty sleazy to kind of, you know, mention that when, you know, I mean, yeah, talk about, I respect the guy because he showed up at a tribute show, but now, you know, I mean, he's kind of... He showed up at the tribute show and he drank too much and he said something in the ring that he couldn't believe when he woke up that he actually said. Yeah. I mean, you know, I guess that's one way where Nash has managed to save so much money then, huh? The other thing was... knocked off those 30 beers a day, right?
That's right.
Yeah, now he's in shape.
Yeah. Well, Anyway, the Sarah Undertaker thing. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is like Russo all over again. I had this like horrible mental image. And I've been really enjoying the shows. I mean, I called in last week, and we've all been talking about how great the shows were. And Bryan, I just want to echo your sentiments. I've actually been looking forward to the shows again over the last 2 weeks. That's a great point. I mean, to actually like know, to read about something that's going to happen tomorrow night, and not being able to wait to see it. I mean, is just it's a welcome change from what's been going on recently. But I'm watching the Sarah Undertaker thing, and I'm like, I could just see this. Like next week, they're going to have a 911 call, and she's going to say, "This is Sarah Undertaker. Please, I have a stalker outside my window at 1313 Mockingbird Lane." And I was I mean, if it was Russo, that's what would happen. I don't even care where this angle goes. I mean, Yeah, I mean, his wife's hot.
Especially,
Great,
they'll probably end up being Vince too. When if it's not Boss Man or something, I don't know. Maybe. The problem with these type of angles is that it's like there's always everyone's waiting for the payoff, and people start speculating, and they start thinking of names like Shawn Michaels or things like that, and so invariably, the old mystery guy is like 9 times out of 10, it's always a disappointment. It ends up being Billy Gunn or something, and it's like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Then what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weak. It's almost like, okay, our shows have been so good, but what can we put on there that will suck just to kind of balance everything?
No, this was Vince's idea. I mean, this was the main event angle.
I know. I'm so glad they didn't go with Austin being the stalker. That would have been so ridiculous. I mean, how do you explain that?
I'll tell you what is on this thing. If you think about it, if they did not elevate Benoit and Jericho the last 2 weeks, and this would have been the main event angle, the TV would have gotten even way worse than it was.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I want to point out. I know that probably a lot of people that listen don't get the Observer, which they're foolish for not doing. But
tell them.
You had an interesting quote. It's about the ratings a little over a year ago. The Rock and Jericho versus Benoit and Triple H main event.
It did like an 8.6 or something.
Yeah, can I read that real quick just so that people hear that? Because I think
Sure, go ahead.
It makes a good point. All right, Dave, when looking back at last year for the business comparisons, on April 24th, 2000, a little over 1 year ago, Raw, opposed by Nitro, did a 7.15 rating, which ended up being its second highest in history, and did an 8.59 rating for Rock and Jericho versus Benoit and Triple H in the main event, which at the time was the third most watched wrestling match in the history of cable television. Tell me Jericho and Benoit weren't ready to headline 13 months ago. I read that, and it just really clarified things. It's like we've been harping for ages about mixing things up, and I'm just afraid that it's too little, too late. I'm encouraged by the fact that they seem to be going 100% full on with this angle, but boy, I'll tell you, talk about a missed opportunity. Obviously the fans were into it, and then it got sabotaged, or it got whatever happened.
I mean, the people who were on top.
I don't think it's too little, too late. I just think it's a lot, a little late.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean to say. I mean, I'm not saying it's too late, but it's entirely conceivable that things could be in a lot better shape right now had they, gone that way. Because, Jericho's kind of like a guy that I think, he's got that weird charisma that he's got a really good charisma that I think would keep the casual fans, and maybe a lot of the casual fans just got sick of seeing, here's some pretty colorful guys like in the mid card, and they're never going anywhere, So, I don't think it's too late. I'm sure the audience will come back. I mean, they're putting on some killer shows and some killer main events, and WWF's always been about the main events. So, that's their little foray into Nitro land. I hope is over. Bruce, I want to ask you one question real quick.
Sure.
I don't, out of all I have every torch going back to like the beginning of '94, and I'm always excited to see, when you've got a new article. I really enjoy.
So am I.
And I really enjoy your writing.
Oh my! Is that like a surprise?
I said, so am I.
That really hurts my feelings. All right, go ahead.
I said, so am I.
Oh, okay. So am I. Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
I think overall your best article was the one that it was almost like a tribute to Ric Flair when you went through his whole career and everything. And you were on the show before, and I think I called in and said this, but especially the quote where you said, Ric Flair was the kind of guy that no matter how big, muscular, and tan you were, there was always some wise ass in an airport, that would say, hey, Ric Flair.
That was a brutal line there.
That was one for the ages, but. I don't know how much you talk to Ric Flair or whatever, but being from the same area, do you think that, I mean, I know that what Dave has written, it doesn't look like, purely for money reasons, that it's kind of, it's kind of 50-50 or maybe less that Flair will be in WWF or WCW, but I mean, doesn't everyone agree? I think Vince would give Flair a proper send-off, and I think fans really want to see that, and I think that one of the keys to making WCW successful is to have Flair on board. Even as a Mr. McMahon-like character on the other side. I could just imagine when I think of the interaction those two could have, or even the interaction between Shane and Flair. It's like, I mean, it just boggles the mind how you can think
Flair
of
and
different ways it could go.
Flair and Angle.
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah, there's some good potential.
there's a million ways they could go with it, and I really hope that it works out, that Rick does. Because Dave, if you remember, I called in one time when Rick was on the show, and Rick said that out of all the promoters, Vince McMahon treated him the best. And which
he likes Vince McMahon a lot.
Yeah, which I thought was mind-blowing when you consider Flair's history with Crockett and everything else.
Yeah, but him and Crockett had their ups and downs, and Dusty was there, which, Flair and Jim Crockett were very, very tight, and then Dusty kind of weakened the bond, whereas with Vince, before anything happened, and right when the time was when Vince actually was started to give up on Flair and was going to move him to a mid-card, Flair asked if he could go, and Vince had promised him when he came in that anytime you ask, you can go. Which is, very strange for Vince to do, but he did, and then Flair asked him.
And he kept his word.
He kept his word, and he let Flair go. So Flair never had to move into mid-cards, and he left, he left, unlike a lot of people who left the WWF, with bitter feelings on Vince. He left with, Vince going, Rick, I promised you could go. All you got to do is lose a loser, leave town match to Kurt Hennig on television. Flair had no problem doing it. He did, and Flair was gone.
Yeah, I just think he's key. I think, and you know what? For the money they'd spend to get Goldberg, they could get Flair, Steiner, DDP, and Booker, and I'd rather see that too. But that's a whole other issue, I guess.
Okay, Chris, we got to get running. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for calling. Let's go to Carlo in Connecticut. Carlo, you're next up.
Hi, how you doing, guys?
Hey,
good.
I enjoy your newsletters and websites, and I enjoy Bruce's columns. And I just want to, my first question, I want to ask about Ric Flair, because I was reading some of Mick Foley's book, and I don't know, maybe this would be a better question to ask him, but he was talking about how some people thought it was unfair about what he said about Ric Flair and his, have a nice day, but then he said that, if he wrote everything he wanted to write about Rick, he said that he had spent...
He edited a lot out to be nice.
Yeah. He said...
Well, you can talk to him about that tomorrow.
About him or
something
like that.
We should talk about that issue, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I'd seen like a column on Tom Zink's website where I don't think it was actually Tom Zink that wrote this, but somebody wrote a column on his website where he said that basically that like the Torch treats Ric Flair with kid gloves, and there's I'd read a few people, including the Honky Tonk Man. Somebody mentioned him before about how Ric Flair, he doesn't help he doesn't help the younger guys out, and he's goes behind people's backs and stuff like that. And I've heard that from a few people, and I'm just curious, like what the real story is on Ric Flair, as far as all of that goes.
The real story is there's a lot of the real story is like a book. There's a little bit of everything. And Ric Flair is not a saint, and nor is he a full-time sinner. I guess is the best way to put it. He's a very charming guy, and he's he's been in the wrestling business for 27 years, and you're in the wrestling business for 27 years, and you stay on top, and it's not just ability. You're part of that game-playing mechanism, and he's learned to play a game a certain way, as far as not helping young guys, I don't know. I've heard people say that. I think that a lot of guys, when Ric Flair turned 40, there were a lot of young guys out there going like, Ric Flair's 40, he doesn't have a great body. What's he doing on top? But the bottom line was that Ric Flair outworked every one of those guys for the next 5 years, and all of those guys that were supposed to be the future, like Luger and Sting, when they were put in that position and every one of them had a chance, they couldn't carry the ball.
The truth
but they resented Flair for not retiring.
But if you look at Luger and Sting, I'm sure I know there are wrestlers that can make a much better case that Ric Flair didn't help them than Lex Luger and Sting when.
He made them.
He made them, and he made a lot of wrestlers by being in that feud with them and carrying them to very watchable, to great matches. And Lex Luger in particular, who had, Lex Luger had some great matches with Ric Flair, and it was Ric Flair and Sting. The two opponents Sting had that brought out the best in him. First was Flair, and the other one was Vader. So I'm not, I've heard Ric Flair described as the shallowest man alive, and I think there's some truth in that. But he says the politically advantageous thing, and he's his job is to look out for Ric Flair and to make Ric Flair money. His job is not necessarily to do better, but yeah, he's.
He's put more guys over than anyone of his caliber in the history of the industry.
So I'm kind of like when they say he doesn't help young guys. He can make a case that he helped a lot. You look at Brian Pillman. There was a lot of guys that over
Well, it sort of depends too on what you term helping young guys out. I mean, with Sting, he made Sting's career in one night. What more can you do for the guy?
Yeah.
And then continued to make him right until that very last Nitro match. I mean, every time Sting was in the ring with Ric Flair, Sting, it was, I remember, like, what was it? It was a couple of years back, and Flair had been gone for a while, and Sting hadn't had a good match in forever. And Sting went out there with Ric Flair, and they had, like, their 9-10 minute usual match on a Nitro. And the crowd went nuts and all this. And Eric Bischoff goes, "That's the Stinger." He went up to Sting. "That's the Stinger," and all this. And it's like, Eric, don't you know that, like, the reason that, he didn't look like he looked with Bryan Adams and everybody else is because Ric Flair knows how to get a good match with Sting, even if Sting's sleepwalking.
Yeah, and certainly Sting and Ric Flair in the cusp of his career, when he was really the great wrestler, he did that with every guy every night. He did that with a cornucopia.
Nikita, remember that?
Yeah, Nikita.
People thought Nikita was a world beater, and I mean, Nikita never, he was terrible.
Yeah, and he did that over and over and over again. Dusty and Nikita and all kinds of people, and some mediocre guys, some very good ones, and everything in between. But there is that other side. There is that other side of Flair. I mean, he's a three-dimensional wrestling personality, is what I'd say. As Dave said, to stay on top. He played that game too.
Where I had read where Shane Douglas said, like Ric Flair blew him off, like when he was with the dynamic dudes, like he would ask him like how his matches are, and he would say, yeah, they're all great. And finally he figured out that like he was saying that about all his matches, no matter like how good or bad they were.
Well, that is Ric Flair too.
Yeah, Ric Flair will say what you. I mean, Dave has a lot more experience than I do with him, but I mean, Ric Flair will say what he thinks you want to hear a lot of the time. And, and there's a reason why he doesn't want to make enemies, so he doesn't realize that people compare notes or, Shane Douglas catches on or whoever. So.
But a lot of that also, that was, again, that bitterness. When Shane was one of those guys in that time period where all the young guys, and I remember because I would talk to all of them, or not all of them, but a lot of them in those days in WCW, and they would always complain about Rick. And the one thing I would always say is, look, he's the one when he gets in the ring who makes all you guys, and you're mad at him for being on top. It's like, he's the best guy. He should be on top. When you take Ric Flair from the top and you put Sting there or anyone there, the first thing the fans do is compare him to Ric Flair, and then they go, oh, God. It's like we want Ric Flair back as champ. And they always, for year after Ric Flair's career was over, 6 months later, 9 months later, a year later, he was world champion again because the booker realized that he's the only one who knew how to make the belt mean something.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is about Kevin Nash. I'm not a Nash fan at all, but I was just wondering, like he was.
Hey, by the way, what did Nash say about Honky Tonk Man anyway?
He said, well, I guess Honky Tonk Man had said about him that that he booked himself over Goldberg, and he said that he hadn't been Booker for he wasn't Booker until several months after the thing with Goldberg, and he said
that's not true. He was Booker and he booked himself over Goldberg, so that's just not true. That's absolutely not true. No, I mean I remember that whole thing when him and Hogan played the game. That was about it was right before Hogan did the retirement. Him and Hogan played that little game where Nash would be named Booker and Hogan would retire and everybody would get behind, all right, Kevin, you're the guy who made Hulk get out of our hair when they actually planned that game for Hogan to get the belt. And Nash would get to beat Goldberg, not Hulk. And then Hulk would do the thing with Nash to get so much heat, and then they would all do the NWO. I mean, that whole thing had been planned from September, and the Goldberg match with Nash was like in Starrcade, so in December. So no, I mean, that's what Nash had been Booker for. I don't know. You'd have to look up the time frame. I guess probably about 6 weeks.
Yeah,
so that's just not true.
He said he had no problems doing jobs, that he did a job to Rey Mysterio, and that...
Oh, yeah, well, there's a difference between doing a job and putting a guy over, and I don't even want to hear about... that's like, Hunter did a job for the Brooklyn Brawler. Now, was the Brooklyn Brawler made into a superstar? No, so who cares? What's the long term? I mean, there's, it's not about 1, 2, 3. It's about getting the other guy over. And Rey Mysterio, that whole thing was such a joke. It was so he could go in the locker room and go, look, I did a job for Rey Mysterio Jr., and it's just like, but it meant nothing. I mean, what, like Rey Mysterio was going to be a threat to him? Go ahead.
I guess he was talking about that he was such a small guy that the fact that he jobbed him was like a big deal, but...
Yeah, it really elevated Rey Mysterio. He got main events after that, or did he?
But it's funny.
No, he didn't.
Oh, that's right.
The thing I was going to ask, I think I already know.
But he did get to lose his mask.
The thing I was going to ask, I think I know the answer already, was if you thought that Kevin Nash was, gets a bum rap all the time,
I think that most guys that people say get a bum rap get treated pretty fairly. You know, I think that people I think that most people that people catch on as being manipulative, and everyone in this business is manipulative, and the ones who get the rep for being manipulative are the ones who are good at it. So you could say it's a bum rap in that they're doing what everyone else does, they just do it better. But the bottom line is they are doing what people say they're doing. You know, I mean, they're playing a game. I mean, when Kevin Nash goes in there and goes, I put over Rey Mysterio, that's the biggest game in the world. Because he didn't put over Rey Mysterio Jr. He did this fluke 1, 2, 3 that meant absolutely nothing in the long-term scheme of things.
You know, the other thing with Kevin Nash is he's good at that manipulation. He's still not in the worst position in the world right now. So
he's in a great position.
He's in a great position in this company that he did, and we're talking about part of the damage. He did an enormous amount of damage, too. And he's really skating. I mean, he's getting paid a lot of money to sit at home and to wait, and things could very well break that after, you know, when he becomes available, he'll get another big contract. And what has he really done in the last few years to deserve a big contract? Not much. I mean, he's done a lot of damage to the company that he worked for that paid him a lot of money. And, you know, yes, he helped them, you know, during their big run, but he also tore that big run down. So, I mean, there are people in this world I feel sorry for that get a bad rap for whatever reason, but Kevin Nash is not one of them. I think Kevin Nash is really, really reap the rewards of his manipulativeness.
Before we go on, I want to make mention, someone said that the best thing that you ever wrote, Bruce.
Yeah.
I think the best thing you ever wrote, ever, it was like the best thing I think I ever read on wrestling was story on Bryan Hildebrand before he died, about when we went to the show in, was it Knoxville?
Yes.
That was like, when I read that, it was like, that was like the greatest thing I think I ever read on wrestling.
Well, I really appreciate that, and, you know, we talked about Les Thatcher, but I did Les Thatcher's radio show, and unbeknownst to me, he had Bryan come on, and that was really quite a moment. I mean, you can look at Mick Foley's book, and I'm sure you guys will talk about Bryan tomorrow, and Mick Foley certainly knew Bryan Hildebrand better than I did, but there's a chapter to him. That guy touched a lot of people, and in a real positive way, and that's not something you can say about a lot of people in the wrestling business, and you could certainly say it about Bryan Hildebrand.
Yeah, you know, we talked about a couple days ago on the show that there's a lot of people who love the business, but, you know, and the truth is the business doesn't love anybody back. And that's the reality that you just have to accept. You know, I mean, it's just the reality of what wrestling is. But, you know, Bryan Hildebrand, I mean, a lot of people have selfish love for the wrestling business. Bryan Hildebrand probably had, I don't want to say the most unselfish, but he was up there. I mean, it was like he would do anything for wrestling, and he really, I don't want to say he didn't care, but he never complained if it was for no money or for decent money. He was happy just to be in it, and happy to rub elbows with the people who were in it, but he had no false illusions about what it was either. I mean, it's like, you know, Bryan, you know, we used to talk all the time, and, you know, Bryan did not live life through rose-colored glasses or anything like that. He knew what wrestling was, and when things were stupid, and, you know, like in WCW, I mean, we would talk, and, you know, he knew they were, and he got as frustrated as anyone else, but, you know, it didn't get him down, and I'll tell you what, you know, I mean, if there was ever anyone who had the right to be bitter about life dealing him a bad hand in wrestling, it was him, and not a lot of other people who complain about it, and, boy, he sure never did. I mean, at least never to me.
Yeah, you talk about a guy, he paid all the dues, he did everything in wrestling. I mean,
yeah.
You know, he did everything, and I just remember watching that show and being backstage, and there was definitely a lot of genuine affection for him, and a lot of people that went out of their way to, you know, show something for him. And that's not, you know, a lot of times you see the fake side of that, or the, you know, or the political side of that, and there was some of that, but I mean, it was, you know, it was a very touching thing to see how a lot of people stood up for him, and you know, Mick Foley talks about how there were people that were interested in his life that kind of got to know him just because he was a part of their business, and you know, he touched a lot of people, and I think even, you know, it's kind of amazing that in a business where, you know, yesterday's star is forgotten, that people still remember Bryan, and, you know, at the height of his fame, he was a referee. You know, I wouldn't even know that you call that fame, but he certainly, within the business, he certainly touched a lot of people.
Before we go to the calls, I just want to read this thing. He goes, this is from Matt DeShong, who goes, the only good conclusion that can come from this Peeping Tom angle is if it's revealed to be La Parka and he does the dance outside the window while staring at Undertaker's wife.
I'm all for that. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't see La Parka getting a contract right now. Let's go to Matt in San Francisco. Matt, what's going on?
Other than fighting the heat, Dave.
So hot out, I know.
It is a hot day, boy.
Yeah, it's
That's
good
nice. It's
100
raining here.
Oh, lucky you, Brian.
When is it not raining in Seattle, Brian?
Just a comment
That's a good
about
question.
Monday's Raw. I didn't get, I didn't take the bait on that whole Bret Hart thing. I
Well,
figured
good, you're smart. I didn't either, but if I was like a fan and didn't know what was going on, I probably would have.
Well, I figured that, they were just honoring Stu, and Bruce was making his power play, to get a developmental territory.
Yeah, you're
going.
very perceptive.
That's I mean, how many of his guys worked that show, that taping?
Bruce's guys?
The two openings, the two
I mean, all those guys were like, old Stampede guys, but I think almost every one of those guys left Stampede and was working for whatever, what was it? What do they call that? Western Canadian Extreme Wrestling? WCW? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that, I haven't been keeping close tabs on who's Stampede and who's WCW, but I think most of those guys are WCW guys and not Stampede guys, although, they all...
Which I'm sure was interesting in the back.
What?
That must have been pretty interesting backstage.
Yeah, but all those guys, at some form or another worked for Stampede at one point, though. Yeah.
Also, I think they dropped the ball last night with Spike running in.
On Angle?
Yeah, they could have used anybody else. From
Agreed.
It would have been Lance Storm would have been just right. A second run in.
Lance Storm would have been fine.
It would have worked.
Shane
I think they're
McMahon would have
holding
been...
that off till the pay-per-view. I mean, they kind of really had to do something with Spike and Angle just because Angle's destroyed him for so long.
Well,
yeah. You're right. Obviously, in the Shane Kurt Angle match, DDP or whoever, everyone who doesn't have their, can get that contract thing done. I think that's the show that they show up on.
Yeah.
I think it'll be Storm. It'll be Storm.
Oh, it's going to be more. I'm sure it'll be more than one guy. I mean, I think it's going to be an army. Better be.
They all jump on Angle?
Or just show up in some form or fashion. The thing is, though, if they beat up Angle, they're sort of baby faces.
But so is he, because he's being,
the American,
quintuple teamed or whatever.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how you do it to where the sides rally, because you got to have a war with WWF. Can't just be like WWF. One heel. I don't know. It would be. They got their ideas. It better be good. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and they are keeping quiet. I give the McMahons credit. They're keeping it real tight.
Yeah, probably because they don't know.
They've got this brilliant idea that's going to blow us all away, and they're very quiet about it.
I hope so too.
Hope. I'll just put it like that. I mean, hopefully it's not because they don't have any ideas, and that's easy to
Well, they got ideas. I mean, it's not hard to come up with ideas. I'm sure they got a lot of ideas. Just hope that the one they pick is the real killer idea.
Right.
Any word on a return for The Rock?
August. Basically, the return depends on two factors. One is when they finish filming the movie, and number two is when is the opportune time to bring it back. Like, let's just say they're done with the movie July 10th, but they've got that pay-per-view July 22nd, and it's WCW against WWF, and The Rock really isn't featured for that pay-per-view. There's really no point to bring him back until either the day of the pay-per-view or the day after, and to build up, a big Rock match for SummerSlam. So I think that's why I'm tempted to say, and I don't know for a fact that like July, 22nd, 23rd, maybe if the movie filming is done, that might be a good time to bring him back.
Okay, that they canceled the Cow Palace house show.
Yep.
They're going to give us Raw day after SummerSlam?
No, Raw day after SummerSlam is going to be in Oakland, and then I think Sacramento's Tuesday for the SmackDown. Cow Palace, they canceled because they didn't sell tickets, so I don't think that I don't think they're going to be going back to the Cow Palace for a long time, if ever.
Well, I don't know. Whenever WWF, later day WWF ran there, it was just, another building. Not like when they had the AWA shows, you actually, felt the history in the building. I didn't feel that going to the later WWF shows in that house. I don't know why. Cow Palace wasn't a good fit for WWF. WWF is like modern and vibrant, and Cow Palace is just like this old building that outlived its usefulness. Now that you've got San Jose, after going to San Jose Arena, who wants to go to the Cow Palace for anything? It's like this old livestock building. It has history because it was the only the only big building
in this part of the country at that time. But, it's for a Major League Pro Wrestling event, I think it just outlived its usefulness. And the fact people wouldn't buy tickets, I mean, I'm not blaming it on the building because they're not buying tickets in many markets. But that's, in this market, I think San Jose and Oakland is just the buildings they should be playing.
I agree. How about Scott Steiner as the Stalker?
He's not ready to wrestle for this pay-per-view, so no, it wouldn't be him. Because it's got to be someone who's ready to wrestle in a couple weeks.
Well, it would work storyline-wise, wouldn't it?
Anybody would work storyline-wise. I'm just saying that, like, Scott's got injuries and he's not ready to go. So it's got to be someone who's ready to go in, a couple weeks.
Okay. Who do you think it is, Dave?
I'm not even thinking. I mean, Vince, maybe. I don't know. I'm not. I tell you what, though, except for the fact that it's going to be such a downer that I don't think they would do it because they know it'll be a downer. I could almost see Boss Man because Boss Man's been sitting there with nothing to do. I mean, he hasn't been fired. It's not like they let him go. So it's like they got to come up with, something new. And I don't know. I mean, it could be Kane. I don't know. I really don't know who it will be.
Brian, an opinion?
I don't care, actually.
Good answer.
I don't really care that much either right now.
What I'm really shocked about is how many people do care.
Well, that's just because
it really isn't. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad that you're wondering. I'm just, I'm looking at Undertaker, and there's this goofy angle where someone is stalking his wife, and it's going to be someone that nobody cares about. It's going to lead to a match that nobody's going to want to see. Yet, I've gotten so many emails and up on the message board, just, email after email, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be?
That's just people don't know.
I'm just waiting until the day when everyone finds out and you all feel horrible.
Yeah, and it's Billy Gunn or Test.
Well, here's my question. Why doesn't Sarah pull the shade?
She
can't see him. Remember?
He's in the tree.
He can see her, but she can't see him.
Now she knows that people are peeking in the window, so you pull the shade.
It's Bruce Pritchard.
Why wasn't she watching Raw? Where was her husband?
Well, I mean,
hopefully all these questions will be answered in the next week.
And if Taker wasn't on Raw, he should have been home with her.
Yeah, they just shot an angle where a family member of a WWF wrestler wasn't even watching the show.
A couple of weeks ago, that could be understandable.
Yeah.
And why was she watching her husband? They also had the angle a couple of weeks ago where Mick Foley got kicked out of the building, and he managed to buy a front row ticket to that show at 8:30 at night. It was.
But he's got pull. He's got pull.
Okay, try this. I'm politically incorrect. Okay.
Yes.
Foley.
Okay.
Flair.
Thatcher's a good. Thatcher speaks very well. Yeah.
And
Tom
in Albano.
Yeah, right. Lou Albano. Oh God.
How about Albano, Bert Sugar, and Dave Meltzer?
And Roddy Piper.
There you go. Perfect.
That'd be the one. Got somebody emailed me some Kevin Nash stuff. This is someone who goes, I'm working on a project for Asian Heritage Month and would like to know if any of these following guys are at least part Asian, and if so, what is their background? Mitsu Arakawa, Tojo Yamamoto, Kinji Shibuya, and Yun Yang. Their hair, I mean...
What does that mean, their heritage?
I mean, they were all... Most of those guys in that era were Hawaiian. Yun Yang, I think, is, Jimmy Yun. I think he's Korean background. Is that right? I'm not even sure. But they were, they're Hawaiian, but I think they're of Japanese ancestry, at least Shibuya and Arakawa. Tojo is Harold Watanabe. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by Asian, I guess. They did a thing of, like Japanese Americans, they had some thing in the Bay Area, I think it was in California, of like, famous Japanese Americans, and one of the people who they had it like in an exhibit at one of the museums was Kinji Shibuya. Not all that long ago. I think they interviewed me for the story, so I'm thinking it's about two plus years ago. Here's some people who want to think that this got some more ideas. The stalker should be China. Let's see. Does the WF inherit the lawsuit Roddy Piper filed against WCW? No, they don't. Time Warner handles all those lawsuits. Anything on the rating? Nope, nothing on the rating. More Vince is the stalker. You ever talk about backyard wrestling with your kids, Bruce?
No, I've never had any kids really participating in that. Of course, my school, they go to 5th grade, so maybe that's something they're doing more in high school. But even the high school kids or the middle school kids I know about, it really hasn't touched them, believe it or not. I mean, I really haven't heard that much around here about backyard wrestling.
You don't hear much about second graders doing backyard wrestling.
Well, they do their moves, and then I break them up and threaten them to, threaten to keep them,
Threaten to power bomb them?
No, I threaten to keep them in second grade for another year.
That's actually pretty scary.
I actually was scared one day because one of my biggest kids threatened to take up one of the little kids, and so it was a few years ago, and power bomb them, and I was just like, oh my, I was just, seeing myself on the news and all that, but so I stopped that pretty fast. So.
Actually, I just kind of glanced at the Nash thing. I thought it was totally humorous. It really was.
Something to look forward to.
I mean, he's clever, but it's just humorous. Anyway, has the WWF already decided who they will be hiring for the new WCW, including wrestlers and writers? They haven't hired any writers. They've hired, I think they've hired like 24 wrestlers, and there's probably about another half dozen or so that are ready to sign at a moment's notice. And so I think they pretty much have. I think that the roster is close to being finalized. The writers are not. Are they still waiting to get a time slot before they make final decisions? I think so, because they don't want to hire anyone and then have nothing for them to do. So yeah, that's true. Why wasn't Stephanie at either Raw or SmackDown this week? She was there. I think that the whole deal was that without Hunter, they didn't have a role for her. And are they going to keep her off TV until Hunter comes back? I don't know. She's the writer.
So no.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting, though, what they do with her. I mean, what she decides to do with herself. I mean, what they do with her, and whether they finally break up Hunter and Steph and put her with somebody else.
Ain't it looking like they're gonna?
That will never happen.
Yeah.
I've almost convinced myself that they will be married, and Hunter's last laugh will be he owns the company.
he's gonna own 25% of the company, or whatever it's gonna turn into, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And he will then be the smartest guy in the history of the business. Let's see. This is Richard Sullivan, who said, in addition to his stint as this is about Tyler Maynard, Nitron, or Daryl Carolette, or the Gaspar brother. He was Nancy Sullivan's bodyguard, Nitron, and also worked as Big Sky, teaming with Vinny Vegas. I remember that. And
that's right, Big Sky.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go to Dan in Chicago. Dan, what's up?
Hey guys, what's going on?
Not too much. What's going on?
Dave, I actually got a Stephanie question, and then I got a question. Actually, I'll ask you first about the wrestling camp that's going to come here in Chicago. Do you know anything about it?
Is that the Barry Fox fantasy camp deal?
Yeah.
I actually do know a little bit about it. I mean, they sent me some broachures and everything like that. And at one point,
they how to wrestle, or
I think it's just like like what they do with the baseball players. It's not so much being taught, but like you get to do like a match. I think the idea is you get to do a match and you up. No. Like you work with they'll bring in like big stars, and like you'll get to tag team with them, and you'll get the videotape it, and you'll have like Elizabeth or Sable or somebody walk you to the ring, that type of a thing.
Oh, okay,
so
cool.
I think that's what that's all. It's like a big fantasy camp thing.
Right. All right. And my question about Stephanie is two questions actually. How old is she?
I think 24.
24. Okay. And you were mentioning about Hunter. With the whole thing where she was crying, are they really dating? What's the deal?
They were, as of the last time somebody told me they were, which wasn't that long ago. But I don't know. It's like I try not to know these things, but I don't know. What have you heard, Bruce? Is there anything new on that?
I want to understand they're together, but I have a different opinion than you do. I mean, Dave and I have talked about this before, but I have the same opinion. But I think in this case, it's news because
it is news.
Because
you're
they,
right.
It affects the business that they're in. They're two very powerful people. That,
it's funny. There was a WWF wrestler who had that exact same discussion with me, because it's like I always don't want to know this stuff, and they go this affects business. They go the writer the guy is dating the writer. He's in 9 segments a show. I think you ought to write about it, and I still haven't written about it in that term, but I guess I just talked about it.
Yeah.
And I think Triple H is the stalker. I think they're going to play it out.
From his hospital bed?
Listen.
He's limping around outside the door. Okay,
no,
that's good.
And first of all...
No, but then they got to get a divorce.
No.
So I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, listen to this, Luke. Can I tell you my idea? I believe that the whole injury thing, because I thought when they show stuff on TV that it's an angle.
Unless it's real.
It's not real.
His injury?
It's not real.
His injury?
Oh, Hunter's injury is real, of course.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Because I thought when they played
it's real.
The presidential election was an angle, but the injury was real.
Okay.
That injury was real.
Yeah.
They could play along with the stalking angle, and Triple H could come back and say that he did it because the Undertaker had stalked Stephanie with that whole deal with Vince, being the remember how he was with the Undertaker?
He kidnapped her?
Yeah. And they could go back to that.
That's why I think Undertaker's stalking her himself.
Hey,
He's
you know
got
what?
the
I kind of
history.
like this, and then Hunter could start stalking. He could start stalking.
Hey, he killed his parents.
No, but his mom's having surgery, though.
Because
That's right, but his mom's having surgery. That's right. Undertaker's mom just had surgery. How did he kill his parents?
And isn't that Kane's mom then?
Yeah, theoretically.
And they didn't say anything about
that's
that.
right.
That's what. Oh my God. Anyway.
It must have been his stepmom.
Okay.
Oh,
And
you
one
just
last
ruined
thing.
it. Thanks.
One last thing, and I'll let you go. On
Yes.
Beyond the Mat, was that girl next to Jim Ross Stephanie?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that because she looked a little young, and I wasn't sure. She didn't.
And she
seem to
looked
have,
totally
like-
different, didn't she?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that's Stephanie. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, you're very welcome. This is from Richard Sullivan, who wants to remind me that Ric Flair had 3-star matches with Big John Studd and Bad Bad Leroy Brown. And if he had 3-star matches with Big John Studd, which I'm sure he did, then he is, what can I say?
I want to mention that every time I come on this show, Richard Sullivan comes in and makes me look bad, and he knows because he knows so much. I mean, he always has that. I'd forgotten about Darryl Carolette, and he just filled right in. But I remember the last show he did the same thing. Smart guy.
Okay. If Undertaker's wife is named Sarah Undertaker, then what is the Undertaker's first name? I guess it is.
No, her name is Sarah Taker. His first name is Under.
Oh, okay. There's someone who says the Peeping Tom is Vince Russo. Hey, Vince Russo
that
like.
would work.
Hey, one way or the other.
He looks like a stalker.
Okay. Let's go to Greg in Vancouver. Greg, what's going on?
Hi, how are you?
Doing good.
I have an angle with the Stephanie thing. I think they should do a thing where the wedding, they find out the person that married Stephanie and Hunter was a fake.
Fraud. Fake.
Come on now.
And they've been fake married for a year and a half now.
Oh my God! Does that mean they've been having sex premaritally or extramaritally or whatever?
Well, he as I recall, he kind of like date raped her.
Kind of nothing. He date raped her. Yeah.
He did several times. Although they don't do that in WWF television.
Yeah. It was off TV.
It was a dark
It
match.
was drugged on TV, but it was off. Okay, yeah.
And the other thing I was wondering is, would they have the rights to some of the different type of matches from WCW to have in WWF now?
How do you
I don't think
copyright a match?
I don't think you can copyright any matches.
Someone asked me that about the scaffold match, and it's like, how do you copyright a scaffold?
Yeah, but you know what? War Games, I think that probably is copyrighted. Don't you think that's copyrighted?
I think the name would be copyrighted, but how can you
but you
copyright
could still
the
do
concept
two
of having
cages
an
and
extra
use it.
cage or two cages?
Yeah, you could do a justice match. It's like Paul Lee, made that three-way dance thing famous, so they just call it triple threat. Even though Paul Lee never trademarked three-way dance.
Ric Flair and Vince Russo did their cage match, it was the Hell in the Cell cage, but they just couldn't call it that.
Right. But now I think maybe they can call it. I mean, I would think they can call it that now.
Well, no one's going to be suing them over it.
Anything.
So yeah, I'm sure that they bought because they bought the trademarks. If WCW trademarked War Games, then yeah, they bought it.
Okay, thanks
Anything
a lot.
else? Okay, let's go
thanks.
to Mike in Massachusetts. Mike, what's going on?
How's it going, guys?
Hey.
Really good.
Okay, I wanted to ask if you think that Rings is going to be able to survive.
Looks bad. I mean, it really looks bad.
Because
Maeda's had a hell of a week this week. He got what is it, convicted or something in the United States. He's getting divorced. His company's falling apart. Three of his guys are gone. So, and you know what he did? He's like, he went on that airplane and sat next to Mr. Inoki and goes, what are we going to do? And Antonio Inoki's going like, we're going to do exactly what we always do with a dead company. You're dead, but you're going to make a lot of money we're going to kill you. That's right.
No, it's pretty amazing because, it was only 3 months ago that there was the King of Kings finals, which was like one of the best mixed martial arts shows ever. So it's amazing that all this is happening just 3 months later.
Yeah, that was an awesome, that whole tournament was so good. But yeah, you're right. That King of Kings was one of the best. That may have been the best
mixed martial.
martial.
If you really look back at like the very, very end of WCW, things were picking up as far as matches. They had the Cruiserweight tournament and everything like that, and then it died.
But it is a question of the marketability. The thing with Rings is that when Rings went. I think rings started losing popularity when they started not working their matches. But the problem was they got caught in this weird thing where the popularity of the UFCs and the Prides and things like that made that UWF style, which Rings was doing, it made it sort of obsolete because people started being able to see through the work-shoot thing, so nobody wanted to see it anymore, so they were forced to do the reel. And then when they did reel, like their draws, like Tamura and Yamamoto, those guys started getting hammered, and, they didn't have any, you know what I mean? It kind of killed their marketability, unfortunately.
Although I think the thing that hurt their popularity even more was Akira Maida's retirement. Because, I remember 2 months after his last match, it was Frank Shamrock versus Kiyoshi Tamura. You have 2 very well-known big names, and that card drew very, very poorly. Yeah, well, because you're right. And it was, Maeda, the whole thing with all these companies is that, you have that super draw, and, you can't really replace them. And, you're right. I mean, Tamura got over to a point, but he was never a big ticket seller. And then once he started getting hammered, it kind of killed that too. And they just didn't. They didn't have like a face. You know what I mean? Like they didn't for a while they had Maeda. And let's say so yeah, they didn't have a face. That's what killed UWFI and Kingdom and everything was when Takada lost his. Whatever.
It wouldn't be so bad if he got hammered by a more marketable guy, but he didn't.
Do you have any idea where Tamura is going to be going? Because it looks like he's most likely gone from Rings.
He has gone from Rings. It's official. Rings sent out a press release about a day or two ago. And it's kind of been known for a couple of weeks, but it is official. But I don't know where he's going. I mean, in the press release, they said that he was going to concentrate on teaching at his camp, his martial arts school. I don't know. I mean, Pride would certainly love to use him on a Pride show. Tamura on Pride would be a big draw. Again, especially
Tamura for Sakuraba, because they both worked together in the past, both as pro wrestlers, and they're both 2 well-known Japanese names. And if I think that if Fujita versus Takayama could draw, then imagine what Sakuraba versus Tamura would do.
Sakuraba and Tamura would draw. Tamura would be really great to see him do some, do something with New Japan, but I don't see that one happening because he didn't the last time, 95 when he had the chance. So I don't know where he's going to go, but Pride, what did I hear? Pride, I heard Deep was interested in him. I mean, Pancras would take him, but it's like the problem is you really don't. The whole thing with him is you really don't want him doing shoots anymore because he's just been too beat up. I mean, that's been the whole problem.
And one thing that I think hurts Rings even more is that their former fighters that have jumped to Pride have fared so poorly.
Yep. I was surprised at Overeem. I really was.
There was Overeem. Gilbert Ivel has been a huge disappointment. I don't even think Pride should book him anymore. And there was also who was that? He was in the first
Henderson?
round of the Grand Prix last year.
Oh, Almeida? No.
No, it was some European guy, I think. I think he lost in the first round to Fujita. It was
Hans Nyman.
Yeah, Hans Nyman. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I knew Hans Nyman was there to get killed, though.
Yeah.
I mean, but anyway, I'm sorry you called so late, but we're totally out of time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruce. I want to thank you very much for doing the show. We got to do this again.
Anytime.
And of course, Bryan, we'll be seeing you tomorrow. And don't forget, everybody, tomorrow's the Big Mick Foley show, so it's going to be a good one. And we'll see you all tomorrow at 5.